Hello everybody, my name is Alan Hackler. I am from Bay Maples Landscaping. It's a business I started about 5 years ago, and we are a design and build firm. I'm a licensed contractor, and we specialize in doing native plants and sustainable gardening techniques. And I've originally got started in natives about 2006. I was studying environmental studies at San Jose State, and I took a class from Gary Klee. He was one of the environmental studies professors there. He's a long-time proponent of using native plants. And when I first started, I grew a lot of maple trees. I did a lot of bonsai and Japanese gardens, and that's how I got the name Bay Maples. And I slowly kind of started to progress more into natives. And now I basically do all natives in my garden designs. And so I started in permaculture. I've gone through LEED certifications, Build a Green, a couple other programs to really kind of hone my sustainable kind of permaculture skills. So that's kind of my background. And I've always been really fascinated about maximizing water in a garden and not being wasteful with garden and limiting irrigation and doing gray water. So I've kind of come to really specialize in doing rain gardens. So I'm happy to have you guys here and really excited to show you some of this stuff I've been doing. So off we go. So when people hear rain gardens, I think everyone has a much different idea of what that means when they hear that term. And a really broad sense of it is just basically a small depression that can receive stormwater runoff, allow runoff to infiltrate into the groundwater table. So that really is a very wide definition, so it can mean almost anything. So, which is good because you can adapt that kind of philosophy to almost any type of garden, any kind of situation. And so we're going to see today. And this is just, I'm going to introduce you just a small fraction of things you can do in a rain garden. There's books, one of the books I'm going to show you later on, it's got 3 volumes dedicated to rain gardens and rain harvesting. So this is just a small sample and just sort of the approach that I've taken. So this hopefully just gets the ball rolling for you guys, and you guys can see how these techniques can really work in your gardens at home. So I thought this was, I was working on a definition. I thought this was just a nice, succinct definition, a nice drawing to kind of really illustrate that I thought this was just really great. And this is cool because this is something from a environmental group in Carolina. So it just shows you that you can apply these techniques to almost anywhere, and no matter what your climate and water rainfall is. So off we go. So this was a nice little diagram. So basically, it's just a way, most rain gardens just connecting your downspouts into the garden, and so infiltrates into your watershed on your house and not overflowing into the street. That is the basic goal of rain garden, is just capturing and keeping all the rainwater on site and not having it flow into sewers and be in excess in our municipal sewer systems. So I tend to get a little nervous sometimes, so I talk a little fast. So if anyone has any questions or I'm going a little fast, please feel free to stop me or let me know. So I got about 50 slides, so I'm going to try and get through as quick as possible, but make sure I explain this really clearly. So why create a rain garden? So I think one people don't realize is the first one is 20% of our end use is just pumping water from one place to another, which is an absolute travesty. And then once we get it to our site, we use it so inefficiently. And the water that comes down for free, we just get rid of, which just doesn't make any sense. And we're going to show you some really simple solutions to kind of get out of that habit. It's good for wildlife and biodiversity. So, having rain gardens means you have more lush plants, you have more areas for birds to interact with your garden, insects, amphibians. So it's great for biodiversity. Replenish local ground aquifers, which is extremely important. Reducing heat island effect. So heat island effect is basically what happens with large concentrations of concrete, and it increases the local microclimate, the heat in the small microclimates. So basically, like you go out to large parking lots, and you feel on hot days in California, you can feel the heat radiating off the ground. And so by planting more plants, having a more lush garden, you're basically reducing that effect in your environment, saving money and reduces waste. So instead of pumping, paying more money to the municipalities for water, you can be using water when it comes for free, reducing waste by not having to have excess irrigation that's not needed, perforated piping that's not necessarily needed. So I'm going to show you a lot of really low-tech, easy-to-do ways of collecting and using your rainwater. I love this saying, slow it, spread it. It's like if you lead with nothing else, that leave it at that, because you can apply that to so many different ways, and just basically just a way of keeping water on site, and it's just a really good way to kind of keep reminding yourself of that little saying. I love that. So, the traditional way of using water comes off our houses is having gutters, having perforated pipe connected right to our sewers. Get it away from as quickly as possible into the sewer system and off your property, which is really a shame, And so we're trying to turn that paradigm and making it where people see it as a resource instead of a problem. And so, one of the benefits to it is reducing damage to property, structures, surrounding environment. You'll see in one of the next slides some effects of not being smart with your water usage. And all these are really kind of great examples of that. So the first few are some erosion issues, some damage in a house, probably from there being too much water next to a foundation, some erosion issues, pollution with our wildlife. One of the big issues too was just runoff from cars, from using lawnmowers, all kinds of different industrial uses. So these are really, you guys probably saw any one of these things in the last month when we had our big rains, and a lot of the problems you see out there were because of bad water management, whether it was in a house or it was on a city level. You just see all kinds of examples of bad design and bad use of water. So an additional benefit too, which is everyone should take advantage of this, is the rebate you can get from the water district. So, and then if you took the slide I gave out, the email address is on there too for the website. It's also right here too. And so basically, where's that slide? So the rebate program, so they will give you up to 75 cents per square foot of lawn that you currently have. It has to be irrigated lawn with a current irrigation system. And basically what you do is they come out to do an inspection. They get a baseline reading of how much water you're using based on your most recent water bill and find out what your current water usage is. You show them your design. You do a real simple, just hand drawing of what your plan is. Then they approve the plan and your plant list. Then they give you 90 days to install the new garden. They come out after the garden's been installed. If it meets all the requirements, basically you have to have 75% of the plants you install to be on this little list of drought-tolerant plants. And they'll give you a rebate on your taxes up to $2,000, which is a great way. That can usually cover the cost of buying the plants and some of your material. And if you do the labor yourself, you can almost get a garden for free. So I think it's a great. And while you're doing that, you can be installing, some rain garden features into your garden. So I always recommend my clients, or even just someone just asking me questions about how they can install a new garden, relatively inexpensively. And I always tell them this is a great way to start. Because usually people, the big issue is affordability, so it's a great way to get over that initial hurdle of no affordance. Let me pass this last slide. So, and some of the simple ones, just rain gardens are good to play. We installed a garden recently, and over Christmas they had some relatives come in, and then we have a little bridge, you'll see in the picture, and the kids are running over the bridge, splashing into water, throwing rocks into the water, and I think it's a great way to engage children with the environment and their garden, and a lot more learning experience and engaging than just a lawn, and they can go and look for bugs, look for birds, and I think it's a great way to get kids stoked on the garden. And also good for your microclimate, improves local water cycle. Those are all pretty obvious to most of you, I'm sure. So, I always hear people say, when I talk about rain harvesting or collecting rainwater, like, why would you do that in California? There isn't very much rain, it's only a few months a year. I say that's even more reason why you should do it. Because if we only get limited amounts of rain, why not utilize that small amount of rain that we do get, instead of just saying, oh, there's not very much, whatever, and just brushing off this not a viable resource. And it is such an important resource. So always, don't, just because we live in an arid environment doesn't necessarily mean that rain harvesting isn't a feasible option here. And also, many of these plants can withstand long periods of drought, even though they are riparian plants. They can take really dry conditions, especially if they're planted in the appropriate place at the appropriate time and the soil is amended correctly. So I'll go, at the end of the presentation, we're going to go through some of these plants and I'll talk about that some more. So steps to planting a rain garden. So just a quick overview, and we're going to go through each one of these. So first, set your goals. 2, observe the site. Define challenges and resources. Establish a budget and project logistics. measure and start drawing, design, installation, and check and test. So, set goals. Which plants do you want? I didn't really word that right, sorry. So which plants do I want to get water to? So do you have some existing plants you already want to get water to, or are you going to plant some new plants? So just kind of figuring out where you want that water to flow to, what plants you want to utilize that water for. Is it going to be edibles or ornamentals? I think it's kind of important, especially with some of the roofs. Some of the roof we have that aggregate with the tar, and that is not really advisable if it's going directly into an edible garden. I would say maybe have some other plants that can do some biofiltration, clean that water a little bit so it's not getting right into your plant, especially root crops. So it's always good to kind of keep that in mind. And these are some examples of goals. I mean, everyone's going to have different goals in mind, so there's just a few things that you can consider when you're starting your garden. Last one, do you plan to be hands-on with your garden, or do you prefer to be low or no maintenance? So that will really going to dictate what plants you choose. Some plants are going to take a little bit more kind of bathing to get established. Some plants you can literally throw in and never touch it, and they'll be just fine. So it's really to understand how involved you want to be in the garden. Do you want it to be something that just looks good ornamental, you have to touch it, or something you really want to get active in and be a big part of? So it's good to have that in mind before you start. Observe site. I always tell people if you can watch a garden through a whole year and see how it interacts in a wet season, dry season, spring, fall, that's always the best, or at least the winter time so you can see the water flow, and at the very, very least, at least through one heavy rain cycle. That way you can just see how the initial water flows on the site, where the low spots, where the high spots, where the trouble areas, where the places where you see lots of erosion happening. So if you can observe the garden as long as possible before you start a project, you'll get the best results. And that way you'll have a chance to really, your plan and your idea will sort of morph as you see and observe the garden. Because what you want to do in the beginning probably change drastically once you've seen the rain, seen how the soil is. So the more you can observe the site, the better it'll be. And that way you're not having to go back and correct things after the fact because you messed up, because you didn't have a chance to really think it out, see how the conditions work throughout the year. Track the water. So go out there, and it's a really rainy day. I mean, I went out it was a weekend right before Christmas, and we had just like 2 or 3 days. It was just downpours, and I went and visited a bunch of my gardens, and just to see how they were working during the rain. It was really fun because it's drastically different than they are in a dry season. So it's a great way to understand your garden some more. I mean, that one's pretty straightforward, but easy thing to forget sometimes. Just understanding how the water is going to flow, so it can really depending on your soil type and what you have planted in the garden, really dictate what is the path of least resistance where the water will flow. So that's another way if you can watch in the rain will really help to kind of get some good understanding about that. Steepness and condition of slope affects speed and volume of runoff. So obviously, really sharp slope is going to create lots of runoff. If you have, if you create a little, you're going to see some examples, but if you do a little swale and it's just a straight line swale, you're just going to get a really fast sheet of water coming down it versus having one that kind of meanders, you have some rocks and some plantings in there. So that way you're like we said earlier, slow it but it sink it. You're slowing the flow. As it has a chance to flow, it can kind of sink into the plants. It can has a chance for some pooling in certain areas, and so you really want to slow it as much as possible. So always keep that in mind. In measuring slope, we could do a whole talk on different ways of measuring slope. There's a lot of tools out there. You can even just do simple string. Bunyips is one thing. Basically, it's just water in a clear plastic vinyl tube. You can find out how the slope is. So there's lots of different ways to measure slope. Another way you can do it is kind of, you'll see in the book too, if you have a chance to look at it, is literally just standing and putting your head between your legs. So it's a really amazing way. It sounds really simple. I mean, it sounds really kind of crazy, but you can see the ground level a lot easier when you're upside down like that. So there's a picture of it too. It sounds crazy. But if you have no other way of measuring slope, just try that. I'm not going to, you probably all laugh, so I don't want to do it in front of you guys right now. So make slope gradual and add plants to control water flow, like I was just mentioning. So, and there's a lot of, there'll be more pictures in the later slides. There's a lot of text in these first ones just to kind of get through it. Observing site. So if you can get out there while it's raining, get out there and mark the spots that are the highest, the low spots, the high spots. That we can kind of establish where you want there to be places for the water to percolate, where you want to put pathways, where there could be planting areas, where there could be different garden features. So it's just really good to establish where the high and low spots are in the garden, establish pathways, and also keep in mind if you have a plan, future for other garden features, just to, once you know where the water flow is, you might be able to change where your thoughts are, because if that was like a really low spot, like, well, it's not going to be a good spot for a chicken coop or a clubhouse or compost area. So kind of keep in mind if you have future plans in the garden, keep those in mind for your overall design. So observing site. So here's a little example of a garden that we installed. It's just a little vegetable garden. And so this was just the area before demo, just cleared out. Second picture is after small rain. So I just basically walked out and looked to see where the area was pooling. And the gutter is coming out right here. And so obviously the pooling area is right here. So by observing where, going out in a rainstorm, you can kind of find out where the water wants to go naturally. So I always try to work with the existing ground, and if you can kind of piggyback off what's already happening and just maximize that, it's going to save you time and effort and usually make it work a lot better. So you can see in the last picture. So once I went out and observed this, I dug some holes, did some little channels, kind of made some small little berms, and then after the next storm, it looks like this. And you can see how much more water it's able to hold. It's all in controlled little areas. So I wish I had some pictures. This actually project isn't finished yet. It's for a friend of mine, so it's kind of ongoing. So all these spots are all going to be planting areas, so you can plant around and in these new little spots where all this water is now collecting. And you can backfill that with mulch. You can just do arbor mulch, composted leaves, and that basically acts as like a big sponge to hold all that water, and then you can plant in that. And you'll see in some other examples of another project, and you'll see it start to finish and how I did it. So define challenges and resources. Obviously, you can't percolate water into concrete or impermeable surfaces. So establish where your problem areas, where lots of times you have a gutter coming out. You'll see another picture of it. It goes right into, the first thing hits is concrete. So like, well, how do I get water coming off concrete into where I want it to go? So that can be a really difficult challenge that sometimes you can't really overcome, or might require you to either use a concrete saw to cut the concrete or a jackhammer. So that could be, obviously it's going to be a big challenge. That's something you can handle. It's something you need to hire somebody, rent material, or rent a tool. Then might going to need to get some more people there. So, establish those right at the beginning. Figure out what kind of soil you have. Is it clay? Is it really sandy? Is it really loamy? I'm sure you guys have seen the little test where you take a little ball of soil and you try to make a ribbon out of it. So you try to make it, looks like a little snake. And so if the more it's able to stay as a snake, it's more clay-like. If you can't form a snake, it's more sandy-like. And sandy soil is obviously going to percolate faster. Clay soil is going to hold water longer. Most people usually say, oh, I have clay soil, and I hate this clay soil, you can't play anything. I think clay soil is fantastic because it holds water so much more. And if you add mulch properly and appropriately, that soil will be a huge benefit to you because it'll be able to hold a ton more water, and adding the proper mulch, it'll add more organic matter to it, and you have a really great soil profile. And when I was doing my Master Gardener's talk, we had someone come in and talk on soils, and he said, he made a great point. He said, you can always take clay soil and make it hold more water, but you can never take really sandy soil. I'm sorry, you can take clay soil and make it percolate better, but you can never make sandy soil hold more water. Yeah. So that's why it's great to start out with clay soil. So I think clay soil is an awesome benefit, and most of you probably all have clay-type soils in your backyards in Santa Clara County. So do you have large roots? Is there a big tree that's going to, is it going to have a huge root system that's going to really determine where you can dig your channels and where you can put your berms in for the rain garden? So that's going to be something you need to address as soon as possible. Establish where foundations of buildings are. So basically, building code requires a 10-foot egress or offset where you can percolate any water. So always try and keep that in mind. But I would always look into your county, your city, if they have other codes, but just 10 feet is the basics.
I'm sorry, could you explain what that means? The egress, 10 feet?
So 10 feet So I can't. So if you're doing a French drain, you can't put a French drain where that water is going to absorb into the ground. It has to be at least 10 feet away from the house. Any closer than that, you're starting to compromise the foundation of the house, especially with a basement. I think it's 10 feet with the basement. You might be able to go a little bit less if you have just a concrete slab. So it's always good. If you're not sure, you can always contact your local code inspector, or just there's code books you can look into. But 10 feet. If you're at 10 feet, you always are good to go. So it's good to keep in mind. Yeah.
So are you saying that like if the gutter is like right next to the house, you need to put something there to send it out 10 feet to drop it down?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a gutter that just comes out and there's no type of system where it's like going into the ground right there and it's just kind of flowing out there, that's okay. But you can't have all the gutter water infiltrate into one spot in the garden.
Okay.
Like as a French drain or a rain garden or a swale of any kind.
But a French drain would be going out away from the house.
Yeah,
anyways.
as long as where it starts to infiltrate into the ground is 10 feet. So you can have like a perforated pipe going to it, or I mean, you can. I'll show you another example. You'll see. It'll be more clear in a second here.
Okay, before you go,
Yeah.
I had a question about the percolation test. What are you
Okay, so
by that?
basically, I'll show you a good picture of the book too at the end. So you basically want to dig a hole about a foot deep, 2 feet if you want to as well, and fill with water. Fill it the first time to. So basically, you're timing how fast the water will infiltrate into the ground. So the first time, you just fill it, and you want to do it with a ground already soaked. So right now is a great time to do it. If you're doing it in the summertime, just turn the hose on one time, let it soak in, and the second time is the one you want to measure. So the second time it goes, you want to measure, so you have a foot deep, and just give it an hour or so, or however long it takes to fill in, and just make your measurement so you figure how many inches it goes down per hour, or per minute, depending on how fast it goes down. And that's your percolation rate. And you can use that figure to figure out how big you want to make your infiltration basin. And you'll see the examples I have will make a lot of things more clear. So inventory, any rocks, logs, plants, trees, other material on site that can be used. One of the things we specialize in doing is using existing material or using found or salvaged material. And so there's a lot of times you can walk on a property and they got everything you need right there to do it if you're kind of creative and savvy and know how to kind of utilize what's already there. And you'll see one of the gardens they've installed, I bought nothing. Every single thing that we bought, everything we used to build the garden was already on site, and I propagate my own plants, so I just showed up with the plants that I propagated, and we bought nothing. So besides the labor, it was basically it was no cost materials besides the cost of the plants. So I love to reuse and salvage materials, and you'll see it looks just as good if you were going to go to buy them too, brand new. So establish budget and logistics. Establish a project budget and project logistics. So I always like to install my gardens in late summer, early fall. I think it's the best time to plant any kind of garden because you get the benefit of having them get rained all season and get established. And so usually if you know that that's the timetable you want to do the actual installation, give yourselves a month or two to figure out your design, observe the area, get materials, convince your friends to help you, And so if you have a time frame to do that, it'll really help to. Because, so the last one I'm not sure if I'm going to slide in the next one. So just make sure you have enough time to get the project done. Because if you were to start the project, before this huge series of rains, you might get halfway done and not be able to finish it. Then it's sitting there for 5-6 months till the spring, then you lose motivation, you're going to go on a trip, other projects. So give yourself time to finish the project, if you're doing it yourself. Or, and make sure you have people, if you're going to have people help you, that they can be there for the whole installation. So, it's just good to have everything just in a time frame, plan as much as possible. You're going to save yourself on time and money, not having to redo things. So, also, with coming to a budget, a great way to make it more feasible is to do things in stages. Maybe you can do the demo first, get that done. You do it yourself before you have, that's not really professional. You don't need to be super trained to do a lot of demo stuff. It's just a matter of just getting out there and doing it. So, those are things that you can do yourself to save some money. So doing things in stages is a great way to do it. And also, by doing things in stages, sometimes when you begin the project, By the time you're halfway through, you might change your mind a little bit. You might see another idea, another concept you want to implement. So by doing the stages, you have a chance to kind of implement that and use it in your design. Versus you do it all in a weekend, you're like, oh wow, I saw this other garden, you know, a month later, and now I can't do that or copy that because my garden's already done. So doing the stages allows you to kind of a little more flexibility. And so when you're doing your garden before you do a design, you want to be able to make sure you measure your space. I like using one of those 100-foot tape measures. It's nice and long. Have a buddy hold it, or you can stick them down depending on, you know. And that way you can get a nice clear measurement of the garden. Get what's called a base map. So just a small basic drawing of the garden. I usually, you know, it's best to do it to scale. So it's that way also if you're having friends or hiring someone to help you, you can have something to refer to. If you're not just like pointing and describing things, and you know what you're saying might not necessarily, you know, make sense to them. So having design really helps with kind of, you know, showing what you want to do, showing what's in your mind to other people to help you. I'm trying to get through this as fast as possible so we can get to the fun stuff. So also good with your drawings, create a scope of work. So that way, if you have whoever's helping you, you can have the drawing with the basic scope of work is just a fancy way of saying a list of the stuff to do. So it's saying, you know, what days you're going to get material delivered, what days you're going to do demo. Is demo going to take you 2 days? So maybe you're going to do 1 week, Saturday and Sunday for the demo. The next weekend is going to be installation. The weekend after that is going to be putting plants in. So having a scope of work is going to really help you create a timeline, a time frame, and knowing when you need to have materials there and whatnot. So scope of work and design are really pretty essential to helping with the project go a little smoother. Installation. Install a garden when it isn't saturated. It can be, you know, a little bit of rain if it's sprinkled a couple days before is okay. Getting out there and digging in wet soil is just miserable. And you're not going to like it, you're going to get tired, you're going to feel a little defeated. So, you know, pick a day where, you know, you're not setting yourself up for kind of defeat. So. And also that comes into planning too, so if you're kind of planning things appropriately, you can kind of work around the weather a little bit as much as possible, and you give yourself a backup too, so if you know, you do get rained out, you have other days to do it, you're not going to mess up your whatever scheduling you have with getting materials dropped off or people helping you. Make sure you have all tools, materials, plants, and labor on site before beginning a project. I mean, that's where you mentioned that. You know, it's just if you have everything there before you start, it's going to make it a lot easier, go a lot smoother. Give yourself enough time to complete the project. I think I already skipped ahead a little bit, sorry. To check and test, I always, before I do like the final elements of the garden, I try to, if it's in the summertime, you're not going to get rain, I'll use a hose, kind of, you know, watch the water flow of the garden to see if what I'm designing is going to actually work. And, you know, if it's great if you can observe the garden closely through a rain, then make appropriate changes as needed, and then, you know, check it and test again if needed, and make the appropriate changes. Okay, so here's a little more fun stuff now. I was kind of just thought of the basic information. So here is a garden that we did. So, like I was saying, it has to be 10 feet away from the house. So, even though technically it's draining immediately from the house, but this initial slope is only about 2%, and it's very shallow, only about maybe this deep of an impression. So the slope is very gradual, and then right here it gets extremely deep, maybe 3 feet deep. It's about 3 feet wide there. So this is where all the percolation is going to happen. And this is the garden I was mentioning where they had the kids come over and they were throwing rocks in there. And during the last rain, the rain came almost all the way up to the top of here, and the kids just loved running over these logs. These, like I was mentioning, we try to use reused material. These were all locally found logs, and we have a mobile saw, and so it's just like a little sawmill, and you can take a 24-inch saw or bigger, and you can just saw flat pieces, and you can make really cool garden elements like this. Just looking at the other angle. And all the mulch here is from local arborists. So we work with tree companies that are doing tree service in the neighborhood, and we call ahead and say, hey, we're going to be doing work at so-and-so's garden. We need a load of mulch delivered. I usually specify what trees I want, because I usually don't want to have anything that's going to be invasive or anything that was really sick or has some kind of a disease. And that's why it's good if you ever do order mulch from a tree service, try to find out if you can get the arborist on the phone that works for them. Usually they have an arborist on their team. Make sure they do have an arborist and make sure they have a license. I mean, if they're not doing the work on your property, it's not that big a deal if they have a license, but usually guys who have licenses are a little more knowledgeable, are going to be a little bit more forthcoming. So those are things to kind of keep consideration when you're ordering it. In this project, you can't see the whole garden, but we probably used about 70 yards of mulch, because this garden was basically a square box of Bermuda grass. I mean, it was just like 6 inches thick of Bermuda grass. And so we don't use any pesticides, so we weren't going to spray it, and it was just going to take forever to hand remove it. So basically this whole yard, we just sheet mulched over it, which is just using old cardboard and just mulch right over it. And that was how we did the demo. We didn't remove one weed, just put it right over it. And the layer mulch must be like this thick. It's insane. But the Bermuda grass was really, really aggressive. And great, I mean, since the mulch is free, why not get as much of it as you can get? So we got, I think it was like 60 or 70 yards of mulch that we got for free. I think it was like 4 loads from the tree. And it was those like big 20-yard boxes. And so I think the neighbors thought we were just crazy, like what are they doing with the mulch? So, and a lot of the plants that are in here are all on the table. So we have some tule, some horsetail, some juncus, and I think there's a hazelnut that's not really in this, you can't really see it, so in this picture, and there's a Ribes sanguineum, which is occurring. So the next one, so this is, if you look on the house, this is the one corner of the house, this is the north corner, and they have one more gutter on the south corner. And so it just kind of looked just to match both sides. So the same thing on both sides. This one actually, it's kind of funny, it's the same garden, and this one will drain in about 2 hours, and this one will take about a week to drain. And this water will just sit there the whole time. Which is we still can't figure out why. It's the same soil type. We don't know why on the same garden. I mean, it's only about 15 feet away, and it takes forever for this to percolate. Yeah, the kids loved it though. Like they were just sitting there throwing rocks in it, running on the little the bridge. I mean, you can see more. We put a little vegetable garden in the back, so as it percolates, it's sort of all the vegetable garden in the back. And this was during construction. We ended up putting a citrus tree right here, which kind of helps to shade all this. So that way the citrus tree and the veggies can kind of take advantage of all the water that's kind of being soaked into the garden right there. So this is an example of what I was mentioning. Be careful of not having your plants, edible plants, getting right some of the water coming off the roof. What's great about this is since this water is able to percolate so close to it, it keeps the water fairly damp and get as much water into the area as possible without going directly onto the edible plants, but they can still take advantage of it. And actually, a lot of these plants are really great for biofiltration. So they're really good at absorbing heavy metals and different pollutants in the roof. Because besides just the shake roof, you have all the stuff that just falls on the roof through the year too. And so especially that first rain of the year, it's going to be especially grungy and all kinds of stuff coming off, leaves and whatnot. And sometimes you'll even see like a little sheen from just oils and whatnot. Sometimes it's just pollen too, so it's not the end of the world if you see a big sheen, but just be aware the first rain is always going to be a little more pollutants and stuff and the sediment in it. So here's another garden. I didn't get a chance to get this one in the rain, but you can see there's 2 gutters that connect right here. And we kind of put like a little island right here so they can kind of take advantage of some of the water coming off. Unlike this one, it's a little more, a little smaller and compact. The homeowner here had a whole lot of stuff planned for this garden. We put in a whole fruit orchard, a bunch of raised beds, a whole native area, so they're really maximizing the space. So that's why this is a little bit more confined. It's not as long and meandering as the second one, where this one kind of goes throughout the whole garden all the way to the street. Couldn't really get a picture of this and the street, but I mean you can kind of basically see the sidewalks kind of coming right there, and it kind of comes all the way to the sidewalk. In this picture we used a piece of flagstone that we had extra from another project. We just needed one piece for this job, so it ended up being a nice little bridge. And there's another example. We can't see it so great in this picture, but we used little redwood rounds, just little steps So you cross over the bridge, and there's a little rock to sit on over there. So and this is all reused a mulch here too as well, and some like reused logs and whatnot. And actually, logs and rocks are a great place for creating habitat for little amphibians and whatnot in your garden too. So having an old, oh, it's my cell phone. That's so bad. I'm so sorry. So logs, or it's in my backpack. I'm not even going to try and fish it out. And so I always try to put logs. There's one down here and one over here, because they just really act to hold in the moisture. Like if you can lift a log up in the middle of summertime, it'll still be wet down there, and you'll see bugs and worms and whatnot. So it's great habitat. So I always like to incorporate logs, and it makes it look like a more naturalistic planting. It looks like you're in a forest somewhere in a wild area. And I think the lady who owns this, she's a nanny, and so sometimes she has the kids come to her house, and the kids run on the logs, they run on the little bridge, and they use a little mulch to build these little like cabin houses and stuff, and they stack the rocks, and they just love this garden. She sits there and reads a book, and the kids just go crazy in the garden, and she does nothing. They don't have to play with them, they just have a good time. So it's awesome. So I thought this is great. So when I was mentioning concrete and impervious, surfaces, like where this, I mean, you have the runoff of two-story houses going into a little, I mean, this is, 4 feet square right here. I mean, what was the plan for that? So it's funny, like I was here, this was actually, I wish I would, if I could take this picture like 20 minutes earlier, you could see the water still like just coming. It would hit this and just come right down the driveway. It was just, if you look here too, you can see where the aggregate from the concrete is being exposed, because it's been happening for so many years, almost like 40 years of just runoff coming down here. It's eroding the concrete. I mean, I just came up there 40 years. No one has been like, hey, you should. There's all kinds of ways you could prove that, and it's never happened. But I wasn't going to try to preach to someone who wasn't going to hear it. So impervious surfaces. So reducing impervious surfaces can obviously give you more places to absorb the water. You're going to reduce heat island effect, like I mentioned earlier. So the less concrete, the better. I don't want to read through all this. Much of it we've already kind of mentioned. And mulch and gravel are great replacements for concrete. Yeah, I want to get through these all.
Now,
So
I mentioned permeable pavers there, but have you looked at, what about the permeable, what do they call it, permeable concrete?
Yeah. This is actually a picture of it right here.
Okay.
It's sort of like an aggregate. It's like, it almost looks like little pebbles, and you use like a binding agent in it. There's a few different kinds. They're all like operated by different companies, but it's basically different forms of just basically aggregate rock with a type of a binder that holds it together. It holds the material together, but still allows water to flow through it. With like he's just dumping a hose, it just flows right through it. This is another kind. These are kind of common. You see people use these in driveways sometimes. Here's another example of it. So it's just like a little interlocking grid system with little grasses planted in there. And you can I've even seen people do like wildflowers. I mean, you could do lots of different things in there. Do sedges, different things. This is probably just some kind of traditional bluegrass or something. Yeah, I just got this off the internet. This is a garden that we installed. Here's another example of using a permeable surface, which is we just used cut redwood logs and just sliced them up in little steps. And you could just walk right through it. She can roll her little garbage cans out there, but still water has a chance to. When it just rained really excessively last month, you'll see the rain garden example that I put in the next couple slides is in the backyard right behind this fence. And it was just awful, just water, mess everywhere. And this was before we fixed it, but this area here was just perfect. No pooling water, there's no pooling water on this because it all has a chance to go somewhere. And it was just a great example of, getting rid of all the concrete and allowing the water a chance to go somewhere and go to the plants. It's a bummer too, right before I took the picture, they had a concrete redone in her driveway, and the guys put all the old concrete mix and just killed a bunch of plants in front of there. So it was kind of, I was pretty bummed about that. So there's a really cool schematic of just kind of showing you sort of, different philosophies of, using water on site. So here's, is it out of focus right there? Can you guys see it? Okay, my eyes aren't the best. So, using some permeable surfaces here, they have a little space between this planting in the street. So, as a chance to kind of, either fill into the grass the planting or infiltrate through the permeable surface. They have a little rain harvesting right here. It's not the best, but it just kind of just gives you some, this is some other, I think it was the same one, the first slide, it was one of the, from Carolina, but I thought it was a neat little diagram. So this is the same garden in this picture right here, just back behind this fence. And so, it's kind of dark, I'm not sure if we're ever going to see it. So if you look so this is the garden I was telling you that we use all the existing material, we bought no material at all for this project. And so, you can see she has a downspout here, and there's one back here, which is looking at another angle, which is this downspout right here. And so she had these neat little concrete things, which kind of helps direct the water, which is a good start, but it doesn't really go anywhere from here. So if you can look, the water would just kind of pool up in this little depression right here. And after a rain, this would just become a huge soggy mess right here. And the pavers weren't really functioning, you couldn't walk through it. She couldn't get her trash cans here, and just was really unmanageable. And so she was asking us for some solutions, so I'll kind of walk you through to what we did. So, God, this is really dark. Can you guys kind of see what's happening here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, one I took that little concrete guy, and it's just sitting on top of the ground, and just dug him out and buried it, so the top of it's on grade, and then sloped it just slightly, so it helped kind of flow where we wanted it to go. And so, I dug out this side right here, and this side, and basically created, it's basically like a French drain, but I like calling it a mulch basin. It's a pretty common term that you see in some of these harvesting books and also gray water techniques. So basically, I dug a hole right here, so these two ditches just go right into this large area, and there's a little island right there in the middle, and I use that for planting. This little ditch is about 24 inches deep and maybe 4 feet wide. And the last storms we had, not one drip of water went over it. It was able to collect all of it, no problem, no mess at all. There's another picture you can see. At the end of this, we'll see right after the rain. So here is spotting the plants before we put the pathway back in, before we add the mulch. It's easier to kind of get in there and plant the plants, spot them where you need to, walk around. So I do that first. So next step, which is great. I got a chance to do that first part before we had some of the rains, and I came out and observed it during a rain. Was able to, so this was the ditch I dug out, backfilled it with some, she had this large river rock on site, so we were able to reuse that, and these rocks are on site as well. And I had some pea gravel that was from a previous project that was just sitting in my backyard, so it gave me a chance to be able to use it here. So as the water comes out, you can see it flowing right here. It was during a rainstorm, so it just hits this and flows nice and slowly. Having the rock there allows it to slow the water flow, and also when you'll see when it's all finished, it kind of gives a little dry creek, looks like a kind of a natural feature. And so here's basically the final look of it. So we put the pavers back where they were. Now it's the highest point. Before the pavers were the lowest point, and they became basically unusable. The little creek right here flows right underneath the pavers. Just typed it right over it. Actually, we went back through and we made it too wide, so we changed it a little bit. And this was actually before we finished that one part. It was raining so badly. Other pictures were so dark and messy. It just didn't really come out. And you can see it comes out under the paver and slowly comes in and right into the mulch basin. This is us, and this is what the mulch basin backfilled. And then we had some different logs that we implemented in there, just to give some for aesthetics, and you'll see there's a little bit of a close-up of the mulch basin, and this is a bit of a close-up of just the spot where the water drops down. This is, sorry I keep saying we have juncus, mimulus, and actually a lot of juncus and cattails in here, and I think it's a little yerba buena down at the bottom. These are all on the table. I'll show them at the end. And so here's a little bit of a before and after. So, I mean, really not a lot done. It's really simple, but it just functions, night and day, how much better this functions. And all basically, look, all the material from that is still here. I really didn't bring anything. Had the mulch delivered, and, we'll use the rocks that were already on site. And so basically the only thing I showed up was just my tools, some plants, and a bag of gravel that I had in my house already, and put that garden in. So not one trip to Home Depot, no nothing. So, and it's great. And once you kind of train yourself to think that way, you'll see all kinds of materials you never even thought about using before that your neighbor might have, he's been getting rid of, or I'll see people putting these big, huge logs for the greenways cleanup, and sometimes they'll like lichen and moss on it. I'll just throw it back in my truck and drive away. People think I'm crazy. Yeah.
A quick question. Once you've done this,
Yeah.
What would you estimate how much percent of rainwater percolates into the ground and how much goes into the mulch?
I mean, I would say 10 to 15% is just going to be sort of between dropping here to flowing in there is just going to kind of get percolated along the way. It's really going to depend on the distance it's got to travel from, where it's coming down the downspout to where it's the final percolation, what your soil type is, what it's planted with. So it's really hard to give you like a simple answer. But I would say, at least 85 to 90% of it is getting to the mulch basin. That's where slope really comes into play. So you really want to keep at least a 2% slope is usually a good rule of thumb. Yeah.
On this one, how did you, because you sort of have it going underneath the pathway, how did you get the pathway to be firm where the little...
We just built it up and compacted it. Just a big hand stamper.
So so it's like a gravel base?
No, we just use, I did this on she didn't really have a huge budget, and she's one of my favorite customers, so I was trying to do it on as limited budget as possible, and I really don't think it didn't really call for a ton of base rock or sand.
Yeah,
or
but
whatnot.
just so we're...
It's on soil.
Yeah, it's just on soil, yeah, it's just on, just compacted clay.
Oh.
Just dug it out by hand with a square shovel so you get a nice smooth finish, compacted it, nice level, and a 2x4 to smooth it out, and just
I
lay it back on
understand the
top.
whole path is how that is, but I'm talking about where the water goes under.
Yeah, it's just dug out, so...
It's resting on rock.
So this picture where it's dug out,
Yeah.
so both these parts are on grade, they're nice and level, and it just goes down right below. That's why I dug this out too.
And
So all this
gravel
starts,
is sort of solid.
go right below,
Yeah.
and you'll see the
So that paper
step.
straddles the
It just straddles right up. Yeah, exactly. It really helped. These are really big 14-inch pavers, so nice big ones, so worked perfect for it. And so I made sure I lined it up before we did the final placement. So the width of this was perfectly, either side of it would fit on there, and it wouldn't be wobbly. You wouldn't step on it and one side cave in. And actually I put underneath it some of these bigger rocks that kind of help support it a little bit too.
Over time, do you have to go back and check these to, because the clay being more squishy in the winter?
Yeah, and we do maintenance at our house anyway, so it's easy for me to go and check on it. And we put this in right before that really big storm we had, like a week before Christmas or a few days before Christmas. And I was just so scared. I was like, oh my God, I hope this, it just didn't get, because that was one of the biggest rains we've had in a while.
Right.
So I had a chance to kind of test it, do a small rain first, get it in the small rain and make any changes. So it was like going right at it for the first time. And I called her and she was like, oh, it's great, there's no water anywhere, it's going right to the basin. And she was really excited, and I was so relieved. It was like my Christmas present. She was a big happy, it wasn't a big mess. So, yeah, so it worked out really great. Actually, I came the next day after that rain, and this was, all the water pooling was that water right there.
Wow.
And we could just kind of fix that one paper. And so, yeah, just a little bit closer a little bit. And so you can kind of see a little start, before and after. Okay, cool. So that was basically, I wanted to paint that garden because Sharon was saying, the whole theme this year is vignettes, and that was basically, a great example of just a small, simple garden. That whole garden space, that wall right there is about 30 feet by about 12 feet. So just a real small garden space that almost anybody could have done that garden. Really didn't take a lot of, knowledge, effort to do. Just some basic concepts and just a little creativity. So this is Prusch farm. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but it's actually a great picture because you can see the freeway in the picture. So this is right where 280 and 101 interchange right there. People drive by, I ask them all the time, and they're like, I drive by every day, and I've never seen this. I don't know how it's even possible. It's got a humongous barn just in Prusch. It's just, everyone just overlooks it. So it's been a really amazing farm. If you guys have never been there, you guys should really check it out. Vegelution, who we worked with to do this, has been doing some awesome community farming efforts, and they worked with NVIDIA last month, and NVIDIA had 1,500 volunteers. NVIDIA at their Christmas party every year is to come do a big volunteer event, and so this year they came to Prusch, and I think they donated, it was like $50,000 in material. They had contractors come, to donate their time, and so they created this really awesome Bio-swale. We built in the greenhouse. We built another one of these out there. So we came out. This is the week before the volunteers came out, and we had our little. This was not my design, but it was just a basic little. This is like a base map that you can. This is not 100% to scale. This is huge, and so it's probably like maybe 1/8 to a foot, maybe 1/10 of an inch to a foot. And so when we did this, so this is their basic idea here was to build this huge platform, that big meeting area, and this is all soil that got brought in to. So previously, this was basically the lowest spot on the whole property, on the whole 80 acres. This was the absolute lowest spot. And so all the water on the whole site would end up here. And you can see, so this is, if you can see these rocks, this is looking the other direction. And you can see where this is the large, kind of the gutter. It's like a 2-foot wide gutter that comes out. And this is from the rest of the farm. So it all comes to this one spot. And so it just becomes a huge mess. And they were trying to now put a stage on it, which I tried to convince them that was not a good idea to do. Unless you have a really, really well planned out, effective swale, and it's really thought out. But it's hard. There's a lot of different people putting input. We had to work with the city, work with the farm, so it was difficult to get everybody on the same page. So we did our best. So this is actually a road right here. You just have total water wash out. It washes out, overflows here, overflows there. I mean, it's basically a nightmare. I mean, you can't drive a car there, you can't work there, you can't do anything. So the idea was to make a swale that controlled all that, and then be able to utilize this as a meeting area and a stage area for large events. And so here's a little close-up. So you can see this is where the water goes. So this is those trees right there. These are all willows, which is great because they love this kind of environment. So they're just thriving. They've been there for years. And so basically, kind of design a swale to sort of work with the existing contour of the ground and work with the existing plants. And this was after that big rain I was just mentioning. And if you stood in there, it would probably be up to your chest. That's about how deep that was. I mean, this was huge. This was with a pump running, with a 5 horsepower pump running to pump this. So if there was, it would have been like, I'm scared to see what's going to look like in the next rain. But hopefully the things we did will fix it. And so it's all kind of, we're going to wait and see. So here's another picture of it. You can see it wraps all the way around this far end right here. You can see where it goes right here. You'll see the picture after the week after when we were planting, how much lower the water went. So you can see a nice before and after. And so here's on the volunteers are starting to show up, and all the little red flags and stuff are where planting is starting to go. These are all sedges, different kinds of juncus. We had blackberry, huckleberry, thimbleberry, salmonberry, all kinds of different edible berries that love riparian zones, tule. All the tules going to basically go in the middle. So when you're planting these rain gardens, you have 3 types of plants. Plants that can be completely submerged, plants that can be partially submerged, and then plants that are marginal. So obviously, totally submerged are going to be plants in the middle, which are things like tule, things like juncus. They can be completely flooded right over the top of the plant and be, even for long periods of time, be just fine. So that's all in this area. Partially submerged, things like sedges, some shrubs, willow, different ribes can even be submerged to a certain extent. And then the ones on the peripherals are things like strawberry, iris. And you'll see in the little list I gave you too. And we'll go over this some more too. What's your time? All right, we got to get moving. All right, cool. So here's some more pictures of this. This is us planting it with the. I try to do all the break with the volunteers weren't there. You can kind of see it. So this red line is basically. It's pretty funny. This red line is where the fence was going to go. But if you look in the other pictures, the fence is like. That red line's like right here. So we're actually. I think after we put the plants in, I think once the rain drops a little bit, we're actually going to end up digging this out a little bit more. so it can hold more water. And there's going to be probably some more like contours in there, so there's some more place for the water to percolate. This is definitely an ongoing project. We're still working on it. And so, if you remember that same willow that the water was like right up to it. So now the water is kind of receded a little bit. We're kind of going in there and planting it. So it looks like juncus. There's some iris leaf juncus in there. There's some Euromanza in there, and some cattails. And so you can see the differences. I mean, where he's standing is probably like right here, and like where this girl's standing is probably like around the edge there. So it means drastic differences to where the low tide. This was a week later with that 5-gallon or the 5-horsepower pump running, and there's that much water still. So it just shows you how much water. I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many thousands of gallons of water are on the site. And so here's sort of where the project is at currently. One thing that I was trying to convince them to not do was put mulch there. Because that mulch, I mean, obviously you saw the pictures, the water is going to breach that, and that is going to become a total mess in there. So you really don't need mulch, but you know, this is also an area, it's a public area where a lot of volunteers, so they're trying to make it as, you know, viable for foot traffic, people to work around, so they really wanted to have the mulch there, but ended up doing it anyways. Here you can see the fence, they're putting in the fence. So that water is going to basically come to almost right where they're working right there. And so one of the reasons why you don't want to do mulch is it's so easy for that just to wash away. And then once that's washed away, then you're exposing all kinds of other soil and then causing erosion. So I usually stay away from mulch. And the good thing is if you're planting enough trees, you'll have, you know, some larger trees like willow, maples, ash, cottonwoods. They're going to be your overstory, your canopy. They're going to drop leaves, and those they'll have over a period of time will create their own mulch. And these lower plants will sort of almost be kind of used to hold in the ground, used to control erosion. So you really don't need the mulch there. And so that's just sort of an example. If you can see, it's just difficult with so many people, you know, putting input into it. It's really hard to get a consensus. But this, for as many hands on deck that we're doing this, it's a pretty good outcome. And especially if this is all volunteers, all donating money. So it's pretty awesome that we're able to make this happen. So it's pretty exciting. I think that's it. Wow. 50 slides. I'm sure we have to go all this. Cool. So do you guys have any questions?
Alan, we're at the Prusch Park. You were saying probably not put mulch there. Would you have lined it with rock, or what would you have done there?
Yeah. I was trying to tell them, use logs and use rocks. But logistically, it was going to take a lot of logs, and it was just hard to work in the budget of it all. And over time, we can go back and add logs, add rocks. There's simple things to do, especially once they can see how, wow, the mulch didn't really work out like we initially planned. Maybe we should try some of the things, you know. It's okay. I mean, and it actually becomes a great learning opportunity for all the people there, the volunteers, and people coming to see the garden. Yeah.
Let's say I had before and after, before just the normal ground, and then after the rain garden. How much longer into the summer would you say that there would be moisture, significant moisture in the soil versus just the standard normal clay soil that everybody has?
So it's going to depend on your exposure. So like if you saw that one garden, that was that little side garden on the house there, that is on the north side, and it gets almost in full shade, even in the summertime. So that will hold water, I'd say almost, and especially the areas that are mulched. Like if you look over the pavers, that'll probably be wet and damp almost all summer, just because that's super clay soil in the shade, and it's like always kind of damp and dreary.
With northern exposure.
What? I'm sorry.
A bare area with northern exposure.
Yeah, well, the bare areas, if you dug down a little bit, will probably be a little moist, but more the mulched areas below the mulch will be the really wet spots, because the mulch basically acts like as a sponge to really hold that water in.
And that will last the entire summer.
So that's why I usually like to. No, not the entire summer. I'm more saying if you're digging down, you'll see some moisture. It's not going to be like total damp and really wet, but you'll see. If you compare that to a garden that's totally unmulched in full exposure with totally bare soil, I mean, it's like night and day. You'll see, especially once you have it mulched, you have more biological activity. You have worms coming in, different things happening. So that also aids in its ability to hold more water because you just have more biological activity happening. Just it's alive versus a total dead, devoid of life soil that's been, fertilized and sprayed pesticides. So it's a dramatic difference when you see,
For things like the ribes,
Yes.
how deep would you put them? I mean, are they way on top of the bank or
So-
are they halfway? Or?
How do I get back on the presentation?
Yeah, let me do that for you, Alan.
So,
You talk.
so I'll go back on the slide. So usually the ribes are a plant that I would call marginal plants. So those would be more on the banks. And so those really won't ever be fully in the water. Maybe in a big rainstorm, they might get a little bit of, inch or so of the plant. Then right after the storm, it goes away. It's not really in water at all.
Yeah.
Depends on what ribes too, like ribes aureum, which is golden currant. Am I still on your camera? Which is this guy right, golden currant's awesome. It's one of my favorites too. Sherry was mentioning it's one of my favorites. It's edible. Golden currants actually, this is actually grown commercially for currants you see in supermarkets.
She's rubbing
Yeah.
it. It's very
Yeah, it's
good,
great.
very
So-
tasty.
It's edible, has awesome wildlife habitat, can be in totally submerged, full water. I mean, zero maintenance. I mean, it gets established
For a
extremely
while.
quickly.
I mean, you can tolerate it like a week or more
Of water?
of being covered in water.
Oh yeah. I mean, and ribes aureum has runners. I mean, this is a very, very hardy plant. Ribes aureum is awesome. Even and if for some reason, even if it dies, the birds will be eating the berries. Volunteers come up. So I think ribes is just a fan. It really easy to propagate, really easy to get established. It's just awesome plant. It's like one of my all-stars. I love that plant. Another great one too is I didn't really mention it in the pictures we saw is elderberry. Elderberry is another fantastic, just like ribes aureum. Elderberry is great because it's edible, and it probably is the #1 habitat plant of any California. It probably hosts more birds and insects than any other plant that we have, and it's edible and it establishes extremely quickly. Yeah.
Sorry, something to add to
Yeah.
that, because, so it's the blue elderberry.
Yes.
But it's edible.
Thank you so much. I should have definitely. Yes. So there's red elderberry and blue elderberry, and they're both poisonous, right? But
No.
the blue elderberry is technically all parts are poisonous, except the
We're
berry.
talking about the berry.
The berry, it has to be prepared. You have to basically cook it off, so the toxins get cooked off.
Oh, my.
And you can also eat. I mean, you can eat it off the plant, 1 or 2. If you're on a hike and eat 1 or 2, it's totally fine. But if you were to eat like a whole handful, you'd probably get sick. I mean, you wouldn't. It's not poisonous at the point where you would die from it immediately. I mean, if you eat enough, but it's more. It gets you really, really sick. So always cook it, and then also the blossoms are edible. You can eat that right off the plant. So if it's got this big yellow blossoms, you can eat those right off the plant. That's one part.
But not the red elderberry.
But not the red. Yeah, but not the red elderberry. You
Red
can't eat the red.
berries.
Yes. It's important to clarify that.
Don't eat anything that you hear in this presentation. Always do your
Yes.
own research.
Yes, that's
You're
right.
not
You
responsible.
should always, if you're going to eat
Disclaimer.
anything, always know exactly what you're eating. Have someone who's experienced. Make sure you have a reference book, a picture. Really know the plant before you just go and start sampling things. Regardless of if I'm telling you or someone else telling you or whatever you read. I mean, it's just like with eating mushrooms. You see people all the time who die from that. They're so-called experts or whatnot. So it's always be extra careful. Yeah.
What about if you have a dog with the,
What's your concern with the dogs?
What's edible?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Actually, that one garden with the small strip one, she runs a dog and cat rescue, and so she has dogs there all the time, and so we really try to make sure we put nothing with spikes on it, like the rose or the gooseberry, or things that dogs are going to be likely to want to eat and be poisonous to them. So those are things I try to avoid. Besides that, most of the plants are perfectly fine. Maybe the junkus, if you're concerned about the dog maybe getting a little poke in the junkus, you might want to avoid that or put it in a spot not right by the pathway, maybe away from the pathway a little bit or so. So this is junkus, this is tule. Sorry. But junkus still and tule both. Not like extremely sharp, but it's enough to work. If it got you in the right spot, it would not feel good. You wouldn't want to keep it safe for your animals. Yeah, so I was going to show you the. Yeah, is there another question? Sorry.
I think you said the elderberry is the #1 habitat plant?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Just as a host plant for birds to be able to feed off of, like they can feed off the berries. Bees will pollinate from the blossoms, habitat for butterflies. I mean, things just to be able to live under. I mean, birds to make nests from. I mean, just endless things. You know, organisms that be living in the mulch below it because it has lots of leaf drop. I mean, just there's so many things that this plant does to just make it just a perfect, you know, spot for all kinds of organisms.
Considered invasive, or?
I wouldn't consider
all those
invasive.
berries that the birds drop, end up having little.
I mean, if you had just like perfect conditions, maybe you might have a few come up, but not to the point where it's going to just be, you know, to the point where it's not manageable. The one thing too, like it does create sort of like a multi-trunk, and you can cut it back really hard every year. And the more you cut it back, the more it kind of wants to send up like more shoots, which is kind of a benefit, I think, because you can just hack it back every year, and you can keep one. So if you're willing to train it, you can kind of control it to be one. So, yeah.
I think it's better to train it to 3 because it's pretty vigorous.
Oh yeah, I mean,
But-
they're extremely big.
But it sprouts all the time.
Yep.
Really nice. Stephanie Morris had one in her front yard.
Still does,
Still does?
still does,
Okay.
beautiful.
The really great thing about this tree, and I think that it's not, I don't think this is highly known, but as the tree ages and the trunk gets larger, like maybe 5, 6, 8 inches in diameter, it starts having that segmented look like
Oh, yeah,
bamboo does.
yeah.
It's very, very pretty. I think it's,
It was in one of the, what's the talk, the wild foods? What's
Yeah, Alicia Funk.
Alicia Funk. So that's a really good book. If you guys, I would really recommend going to that talk in a couple weeks. Yeah, she's awesome. Her book is really fantastic. And she has a couple pages in the book of how they would use elderberries to make flutes and musical instruments because it has the hollow center. And she has these pictures of these really ornate little flutes, and ask her about that. She'll probably have some really cool things you can do with elderberry. That's a great book. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, elderberry's
She
fun.
has a second edition.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She's really cool. Anyone else have any
what was
questions?
the name of the book?
Living Wild.
Yeah, Living Wild.
Living Wild.
Okay.
Yeah, she's coming to one of the San Jose libraries,
Yeah.
and then she's also going to be at Cupertino in April, so we'll have her twice.
Yeah. And she has kids too. She designs a lot of her gardens to be kid friendly and edibles and stuff, and she's great. Yeah.
Should we go through the rest
Yes,
of the plans?
yeah.
Or have you gone through the rest of the
I
plans?
haven't really
Should
had a
get us
chance to
out
go
on
through
time?
all of them.
Okay, take your
Do you
time.
have any specific questions, or how much we can go to 8:30 or so? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, we want to be, yeah, 8:30
Is
would
it
be good.
possible to have a light on for the?
Yeah.
I'll get it. That'll be good.
Like a seep in the ground.
Frutadas?
Yeah, Mimulus frutalis is the Latin name. And what's cool about this too is the really, I mean, this is probably one of the easiest plants to propagate that we have. I mean, you can just.
It's a mineral, you said?
Mimulus, yeah. Yeah. So you can just like take these little offshoots really easily and just, I don't want to make a huge mess here. But you can just like break these off, and I mean, you could probably make like 10 little plants from just this little one guy. So actually all these plants here are all plants that we propagate. I have a nursery. So when we do our garden designs, we bring our own plants in. So it's kind of an added benefit. So some of these plants can be hard to find sometimes. So if I propagate our own, we always know what's available and kind of access to it. So these are all plants that are brought from my nursery. If you guys want, I can pass this little guy around if you guys want to take a look at it. Pass it around a couple of these. You sound like you've probably seen a million of these.
Yeah.
This is Yerba Manza, which is another great one too. This has lots of like medicinal qualities to it.
It's dripping.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm probably gonna make a total mess up here. And this is arroyo willow. So willows are great. I mean, willows establish really quickly. They will fill in extremely fast. They can be completely submerged in water. I mean, you can propagate them by literally just breaking off a stem and just like sticking it in the ground. And that's all you gotta do is seriously.
Do I raffle that one off?
Yeah.
Do I raffle that one off?
It's like sometimes you'll see like the city of San Jose, the watershed for a creek restoration. They'll come out to a willow that's already on like, at the site where they're working. They'll just take branches from it and just put it in the ground. And that's how they do creek restoration with willow. So I mean, this is one of the easiest and most fun plants to grow. And willow's cool too because you can train it really easily. You see people do like the willow little arbors and structures. So willow's really fun for those kinds of things. You get all kinds of little tools you can make out of it.
But it needs tons of water.
It'll do better in water, yeah. It likes to be in a really wet spot.
And so it can't take the dry summer?
In most of my garden, about 90% of my gardens I install no irrigation systems. I have no irrigation in my own home garden, and I put some in there and just put, I always plant plants in it while it's raining, put them in, mulch them, and walk away. That's basically how I plant plants. And I think one of the keys to planting plants is not planting a plant that's really root bound. Because people will plant this really root bound plant and just stick it in the ground, not break up your ball at all, and just like think that that plant's gonna be healthy. And it's like, what's the incentive for those roots to shoot out anywhere? Because they're in this little nice little root ball, they're super happy, and so the key to making a plant establish quicker is to really get a plant that's not already root bound and tease the roots really good, and just even cut off really woody, really hardy, roots. Just get it out of it because they're usually not going to be very vigorous. And by getting rid of them, you increase new vigor for the existing roots that are still there. So if you saw what I do to these plants, you'd be like, oh my god, the plant's going to die. I just really break them up. If we were in a better spot, I would do it here, but I don't want to make a big mess. But literally, I just make sure that all the root is completely broken up, teased apart, all the roots have a chance to really spread apart. So some other ones I really like, and it's also edible, is this gooseberry. So this is Ribes menzii. This is up on, collected from a buddy of mine who has some property up on Santa Cruz, up on Summit Road. And this is a great one. Also be careful, because it has these little spikes. That's the really big spikes, and also these little fine spikes in between the big spikes. So this one can be really kind of treacherous to walk through. So put it in an appropriate spot. But has these beautiful little red flowers that hang down, and the hummingbirds just love this, and has edible berries, so this is a really, really fun plant. And this one can take it, I wouldn't put it in full water, I'd put it somewhere where it can maybe get partially submerged, or like in a marginal area as well. Lonicera is another great one too. It's a vining plant, so it's great to plant maybe like next to a willow, or next to a maple, or a larger plant.
What was it again?
This is Lonicera americana, which is a cross between the Hispidula. And yeah, this is not our. The other ones I have were completely dormant, so it wasn't too showy, so I brought this one. And it's also edible and also has really beautiful red flowers. Attracts a lot of birds and bees.
Now say it again, what it is?
Lonicera. Our native one is Lonicera hispidula, and Lonicera. What's our other one? We have a couple. Lonicera hispidula is the most common one you'll find in nurseries and easiest one to get access to. Or is Lonicera? Yeah, sorry. Sally did. She'll probably know. Probably knows a lot more. I'll probably ever know.
Twinberry, yes.
Yeah.
Twinberry, yes.
So. This is a fantastic book. And they just came out with a new one with some updated things with more pictures and stuff. But this is a great book. Yeah, sorry. And really quickly too, I want to mention this book right here. Some of you might have seen it. It's written by Brad Lancaster. He is sort of like the absolute guru of doing rain harvesting for dry climates. He lives in Arizona, which gets even less rain than we do. So if people in California say that we can't do this, and he does it in Arizona, I just want to just like hit him with this book. So this is a great book. He has 3 volumes. If you're only going to buy 1 volume, we're not sure if the 3rd one's come out yet. I've probably seen it in some presentations, but I'm not sure if it's available to the public yet. But look for it. But the 2nd one, the 1st volume is kind of theory. 2nd one's more hands-on. Has lots of example projects and stuff. This is a fantastic book. Tons of pictures. Oh my god, I feel so embarrassed myself. So this one's really cool too. It's actually both the authors are European, and it shows you how different their approach to using water in like public spaces is to what we have. I mean, they show these awesome public rain gardens with like bridges, places for the kids to engage in, and I'm like, that would never, ever get built here because of litigation and people get here and have kids falling in the water. And I think it's a shame because kids love playing around water, and how will they ever learn to not drown or not get sick?
Are we able to question that?
So what is the name of your business?
Oh, Bay
He's got-
Maples.
He's got
I have
cards
business
up
cards
there.
up here, and on my
Oh,
shirt too.
great, okay.
Wild California Gardens. Yeah, so both these books are on the little handout, if you guys didn't get one, or make sure we have enough too. So, and also that handout has a really cool, there's a link to a book that came out through the Sonoma County Environmental Services, and it's called Slow It, Spread It, Sink It. And it has a lot of stuff I had on here, but goes in a little more in depth. And I think it's free. I think you can or you can just get the PDF and look online or print it out, however you want to do it. But the link to it's on the handout I passed out. So definitely look at that. But if you were going to buy like only 2 books that were on rain harvesting or just rain gardens, these are the 2 that I would really recommend. And they're also on the handout as well.
The handouts didn't come out all the way around, so is there a way to get a PDF of them online or something?
I think she's making.
Yeah, I think she's making some more copies.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, make sure, and I can, if anyone for some reason didn't get one, I can always email one out to anybody too or whatnot. This is a great one too, not necessarily on rain gardens per se, but just on water efficient gardening in general. And so it's a great way to incorporate overall water efficient gardening with your rain harvesting, rain garden techniques. So if you kind of marry the 2, you can really maximize your efficiency and limit how much water you have to get from municipal, from your hose or whatnot. So it's a really good, so it kind of helps kind of create a holistic approach to your garden. So this is a fantastic, I love this book. So it's called Gaia's Garden. This one's actually not on the handout, but I really recommend this book. This is just awesome. If you've never gotten introduced to permaculture, it's a great introduction to permaculture techniques. And he covers rain harvesting, gray water, a lot of the stuff. He's actually friends with Brad Lancaster, so a lot of the things he's mentioned here, he put in this book as well. He references this book too in here, so that's a really good one. Yeah, should we do?
We're
Yeah.
out of time.
Awesome.
We want to thank Alan very
Thank you for
much.